Today we have Kendyl Berma with Beyond the Reef. We discuss fixing boats to sink them, talking to whales, and Christmas in July. This is Stephanie Lowry, and you're listening to the Songs in the Sails podcast. Hey, how are you today?
Good, thanks. Nice to see you again.
You too. Where are you at today?
I'm in New York, but I still go mostly between BVI and California.
Very cool. Well, I guess let's just jump right in since we've been bantering
Yeah.
a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm originally from Southern California, and I grew up going to tide pools. My mom was really into scuba diving, so I kind of got a love of the ocean through her. And then when I went to university, I went to Santa Barbara and did environmental science.
Okay.
So that was sort of my original trajectory, was to go into marine science.
Okay.
But then when I was at school, I got an internship at Discovery Channel. And I realized that that actually seemed a lot more fun than sitting in a lab doing science and in some of the ways that other scientists were doing it there. So not saying Discovery is particularly environmental. I think at the time it was shows on logging and catching tuna, but they have their really nice ones as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, from there I ended up just realizing that kind of wildlife TV making was really fun. So I spent the majority of my 20s doing wildlife documentary TV stuff. Which actually brought me to the British Virgin Islands and the Caribbean. I was working on a show with the Cousteau family, Philippe and Ashlyn. We were going around looking at different shipwrecks of the Caribbean, and that initially is what brought me to Tortola. Created some relationships there, and then Irma and Maria came, which were two, obviously, as you know, two really devastating Category 5 hurricanes.
Right.
That changed the territory quite a bit, and that's actually what I would say really started Beyond the Reef, which is the organization now that I helped co-found with Chris Jordan, who has been in the BVI for a really long time and has a lot of companies down there that are in the ocean space.
Right. I actually was talking to a crew the other day and how a lot of the reefs are doing, they're struggling, but the structures you guys have made are doing really well.
Yeah, so I mean, coral reefs across the world are struggling. It depends, different ecosystems have different issues. Right now, the BVI is facing bleaching. We've actually just recently had somewhat of a bleaching event. We also have stony coral tissue loss disease, which is a disease that came up from Florida and then eventually the US Virgin Islands and then into the British Virgin Islands. They think actually it came as water ballast. So some of the bigger ships carrying water as ballast would have had this disease in their water and then come into port in St. Thomas, dropped it. They got the disease. Eventually it made its way to us. By the time it made its way to us, there were already protocols in place in Florida, set out, I believe, mostly by NOAA. So we were able to just sort of follow along with that. But yeah, coral across the world is
Struggling.
Is not having the best time.
Right.
And it's a really hard thing to solve for.
Right.
So one of our contributions to that was artificial reef building in the form of recycling derelict vessels. And, obviously that's just a few structures that exist in a large sea of dying coral. But our hope was that it would also take some pressure off of our natural dive sites in the BVI and bring tourism there. So I can go into, all the reasons why we built them, but yeah, that's a little bit of the background.
That's neat. What is the ultimate reason why you guys started Beyond the Reef? Was it because of the hurricanes, or what was your initial why?
Yeah, I think it was multiple things. It was really just seeing that the BVI kind of lacked a nonprofit that was doing all of these different categories of ocean conservation. I think we saw that there was a gap, and that it could use it. Anywhere in the world could use multiple organizations that are trying to help the environment or whatever cause it is. But I do believe it was probably Irma and the amount of destruction that it did to the
Right.
reefs, and then also the fact that we had all of these derelict vessels just,
Yeah.
laying across the coastline. So the
Right.
first one that we did, the Willie T, which is a really famous floating party barge in the BVI. That's the I think where you and I initially met actually
Yes. Yes.
in person, which we can go into that story later because it's kind of funny. But yeah, we saw that there was this really famous, really beloved boat to the BVI
Right.
that was now just sitting wrecked on Norman Island,
Mm.
which is an island within the BVI. And every day that went by, it became more and more part of the environment, and it shouldn't have been at the time because
Mm.
when we sink a boat, we're totally stripping it. Um, of all chemicals, of all materials to make it
Mm.
so that it is just a steel structure. But at the
Right.
time, it was a restaurant the night before. So,
Right.
as well as
Right.
a place that the employees sleep. So it still had all of their items. It still had beds. It had its oil. It had,
Right.
all of these materials that really shouldn't, stoves. These
Yeah.
materials that really just shouldn't be on the coastline because they're going to continue to spread out. They're going to continue to go into the water.
Right.
And then same with the airplanes that we ended up sinking. They were also derelict. One actually was from a plane crash, and the other two were
Mm.
Irma planes. But the same idea where you strip them free of
Yeah.
every single thing in them that isn't just metal.
Yeah.
Um,
Now you also have the
and yeah,
Kodiak, right? The
yeah. So that one was actually pre Beyond the Reef formation. That was
Okay.
one that Chris was involved in with some other people, some of the
Okay.
Virgin Unite people.
Mhm.
Owen Buggy was another one involved in it. And they had done the Kodiak Queen not too long before Irma. So he'd
Yeah.
already figured out how to do these really large scale
Right.
artificial reefs. And I think at the time there was nothing like the Kodiak Queen
Right.
um, in the world. I still think that what Beyond the Reef is doing is a little bit different, and that we're turning them into art projects
Yeah.
before sinking them. So it ends up being, so sort of the reason for doing it was one, to recycle
Mhm.
something that was going to be both an eyesore and environmentally hazardous along the
Mhm.
coastline. The second was to take something that was going to be waste and repurpose it into artificial reef for the sake of coral. So, one of the reasons that we sank them where we did after doing environmental impact surveys was because that's where it seemed like the reef would most need it. So
Gotcha.
Willie T, for example, has a big coral wall on the side, and we were able to sink it, just a few feet from there, so that it's
Mm.
helping to rebuild that reef as well. And then the other reasons we did it were tourism. BVI had just taken a huge hit, obviously,
Yeah.
after the hurricanes, and so this was encouragement to, come down.
Yeah.
Our reefs are still diveable. There's these new things you can come do.
Right.
We're trying to be more of an ecotourism location.
Yeah.
Uh, and then the last reason we did it was to give back to local kids' swim programs. So we
That's right.
realized that only 1 in 10 children in the BVI is actually proficient at swimming, which
Mm.
is a really shocking number based on how much, their lives are based around the ocean on an
Right.
island. And
Right.
whether it's for getting jobs in the future, as dive
Yeah.
instructors, captains, surf instructors, or even just safety. Everyone has to really
Mm.
travel between the islands to get to airports, even, or to go to another
Right.
island and see friends. So it is sort of a safety factor as well.
Yeah.
So the idea became that for every scuba diver on the site, we would ask them to donate $5, and that would go directly to local kids swim programs. And
Mm.
Beyond the Reef doesn't run those. We end up donating those to um, the the programs that then teach the kids to swim. But every year we're getting more and more
Yeah.
donations in, which is great. So
Yeah.
it was kind of a overall, let's recycle this, let's do something really cool that makes news in the BVI,
Yeah.
let's turn these into cool art sculptures, revitalize the reef, and then also give back to local kids for swimming. And
Yeah.
now it's turned a little bit more into marine science programs as well.
That's cool. How many structures are there in total now?
So right now there's the Kodiak Queen, the Willie T, and the Shark airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
The Shark airplanes are also next to a mooring archway
Mm-hmm.
that took recycled mooring lines that had corals grown on them already,
Right.
um, and put them into kind of a cool shape. And we have currently shipping to the BVI is a stingray sculpture that's going to go under a floating spa there.
Yeah.
But we're hoping to
Oh
do
yeah.
another, yeah,
That's
so
a cool
some little
idea.
things that are a bit more accessible to snorkelers. Ultimately, I mean, we want to keep building it out as much as we can and
Yeah.
also build it out for snorkelers rather than just divers. But we would
Right.
also like to do Miss Sophia, which
Yeah.
is another Irma boat that's 100 foot, really dug into the coastline
Mm.
ship. So it's quite the process when you go to make an artificial reef like this with a 100 foot steel ship.
Mm.
It's it's really exciting actually, because the
Yeah.
first thing you have to do is you strip it, you clean the area, then you have to pull the boat off the coastline. So that requires massive tugboats pulling it, an
Right.
excavator lifting it, you know, a crane pulling it up, an
Right.
excavator coming from below, a barge pulling it. Um, that takes a long time to get it off because it's had,
Right.
5 years to dig itself in. But
Right.
then after that, the challenge becomes, okay, now we've just pulled a boat out that doesn't have a bottom to it anymore.
Mm.
So how do we patch it? So that's when Commercial Dive Services, which is a commercial scuba diving company that we're partnered with,
Right.
comes in and quickly just tries to underwater weld, patch. Like
Mm.
the divers are, under there trying to patch in 3 feet of water.
That's really cool.
So that part's really dangerous and exciting.
Yeah.
But the goal then is, okay, we've just got this boat off. Let's have it not sink again
Right.
and do any more damage.
Right.
So that's kind of the part that makes you hold your breath the most
Yeah.
initially. Then you put the artwork onto it, and then you hold your breath again while you tow it to the site that it's designated to be
Right.
sunken.
So they build the sides there?
So right as we pull it off the
Mm-hmm.
coastline, that's when
Yeah.
we want to patch it. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
Oh wow.
we would patch it, try to make it seaworthy enough, and just put it in a few feet of water
Mm-hmm.
nearby where it was sunk. We would
Okay.
do the entire art build there.
Got it.
Um, you don't want to put art on something, you don't want to put the effort into putting art on it
Mm-hmm.
until you actually have it floating. So
Right.
once it's deemed seaworthy, we do that, and then we also will build into it an easy way to sink it. So we'll patch all of the holes, but then
Mm-hmm.
we'll also add purposeful holes
Holes,
for when
right.
it comes time to sink. You end up, everyone goes down, takes a location, you twist it
Yeah.
to let the water come in, and then
Yeah.
you hold your breath again uh, as it's towing. You get to the
Right.
spot, you do that, and then it's kind of like hurry up and wait. So it takes an hour of trying to sink itself, and then the second it wants to go, it's like
Is it goes.
20 seconds until it's done. And then we also have lift bags that will make it sink in the direction we want it to. And
Right.
sometimes we have anchors in place. So there's a lot of engineering that
A lot
goes
of
into
moving
it.
parts.
Yeah. It's probably our most exciting project in that
Right.
regard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really neat. I know we were helping to raise awareness for this sinking of Willie T's, but we didn't actually get to see you guys doing all that. We had just missed it. I was bummed, but I saw video.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
definitely not the same, I'm sure.
No, I mean, it's a really exciting thing to see. I mean, people love watching catastrophes. So there's
Yeah,
something that humans love about watching a train wreck.
right.
And the same
Yeah,
thing with watching a boat sink. You're like, oh, this
right.
is great that it's actually for a good cause, but there's something wrong in my brain that loves
Right.
seeing this go
That I'm
down.
enjoying this. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Yep.
Now you have the efforts coming up about cleaning the beaches or something, right? I think I've been seeing
Yeah.
that.
So that's another project that we do is ghost fishing gear removal
Hmm.
mostly. So it's a little bit more than your standard beach cleanup. We really
Mm,
focus on what we call ghost gear,
yeah,
which is any sort of discarded, lost, abandoned fishing gear. And the
yeah.
BVI ends up getting a ton of it based on the way that we're situated. It's almost like the next stop from us is Europe or Africa. So places
Mm,
like Anegada, which is one of the low-lying kind of outside coral islands, gets so much, and it
yeah.
actually gets trapped in the reef as well. So
Mm.
we do a few different types of cleanups. We do some that are community based to get local community involved. And those will be on the beach generally in different
Right.
areas, picking up trash. But most all of it has something to do with fishing, whether
Mm.
it's drums or even like fishing boots or
Yeah.
Crocs, sandals, but it's
Yeah.
mostly nets and ropes.
Right. I've seen
So
some of your
then, yeah.
pictures. They're huge
Oh,
wads. I
yeah.
mean,
They're
it's
massive.
insanity what is
Yeah.
being pulled out. I mean, crazy. When you're getting it out of coral, do you have to, I'm sure you have to like delicately cut around it or like with gloves
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
yeah.
so there's a few ways that we get it out. We have for the smaller stuff. So basically what happens is a big net will get caught in an outer reef. It'll break up, become smaller, get caught on the inside, turn into smaller and smaller bits. So occasionally someone will actually call us and say, or write on our Facebook page or something and say, "Hey, we spotted a net recently from a plane or a
Mm-hmm.
helicopter or while we were out and it looked really big." So
Mm,
we'll put divers in the water, inspect it, and then if need be, bring a barge and crane, again borrowed from
gotcha.
commercial dive, and they'll actually need to pull it out with a
Gotcha.
large barge and crane
Where
and then
do
this.
those
But
types of big nets come from? Just
so we
larger
think
fishing
that,
vessels?
yeah, so the BVI doesn't actually have any fishing within it that
Right.
would have a net like that.
Yeah.
So it's either floating in from really far away or more
Mm.
likely illegal fishing,
Ah,
just outside of our waters or actually maybe within our waters.
right, right.
But other than that, we have teams that will actually, we call it shark lining.
Yeah.
We'll pull a diver from behind the boat, and in
Mm.
places like Anegada where there's a lot of shallow reef, and
Mm-hmm.
they'll just look around to see if they see nets. The second they see a net, they'll raise their hand. We'll stop the boat. Our
Yeah.
team of divers will jump in. Oftentimes free diving. Actually, we have a
Mm.
lot of really talented women who are currently on our
Yeah.
Beyond the Reef team. It's really cool actually. It's like five girls jump in their little wetsuits with knives and hold their
Yeah.
breath for 3 minutes while they're cutting out nets. It's kind of a cool
Wow.
sight actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's
So
not
yeah,
very
no
deep
matter,
there.
no, it's not that deep. It's usually under 40 feet.
And usually it's
So
easier to hold longer the deeper you are, yeah?
yeah, I mean, that's if it ends up being something that's going to be a real task, we do bring tanks as well.
Yeah.
But if it's a lot of times once it's in the reef, it's
Mm-hmm.
smaller bits that have broken up.
Right.
So they'll go down, they'll saw away with their knives, come back up for air. Do that a few times. We also do
Yeah.
that with ghost pots. So that's
Mm-hmm.
any sort of fishing pot that has
Mm-hmm.
become abandoned, and that ends up sort of being this death trap in a way that a fish will go in there,
Mm-hmm.
die, attract another fish, go in there, die, and it's not
Yeah.
helping anyone because the
Right.
fishermen aren't collecting that pot anymore. So
Right.
if we decide that it is definitely abandoned, which it's really easy to tell, if there's no buoy that's going up to it, then no
Right.
one's coming for it. We'll remove those as well. So
Gotcha.
few different ways that we do cleanups, but yeah, it's really mostly focused on this ghost fishing gear, which the BVI has a disproportional amount of.
Wow. Now you're also a part of the whale research in the BVI too, right? You guys have so
Yeah,
many awesome
so
things
I
going
know,
on.
right? And sharks, and yeah,
And
so the
yeah.
whale research only started just over a year ago.
Yeah.
We partnered up with another organization called the Caribbean Cetacean Society,
Okay.
who trained us on their methodology because they were doing this type of research in some of the other islands
Right.
in the Lesser Antilles. So we figured we would just replicate their methods in order to grow this map of data. So yeah, we began doing that. It's all cetaceans, which includes whales and dolphins.
Mm-hmm.
But we've focused a lot on humpbacks actually, because
Mm-hmm.
that seems to be what the BVI has such an incredible abundance of, especially
Right.
behind Anegada certain months of the year.
Mm.
We've come to realize that it's entirely unstudied, but
Hmm.
we're a really important part of their migration route. And I
Interesting.
believe it's because Anegada has a really shallow shelf that quickly goes really deep. So it goes from 20 feet to 2,000 feet
Mm.
quite quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And the humpbacks like to hug that wall So we usually find them in just a few 100 feet of water, whereas
Wow.
the sperm whales are known to be much deeper. But yeah, the humpbacks seem to have a specific track that they
Route.
stay on. So we
Now,
use drones and
what
yeah.
are you doing when you're studying them? Are you listening
Mhm.
to them, or you're just watching their migration, or all of that?
Yeah, all of that. We're just trying to get a baseline
Mm,
data set for whales in the BVI. So we're
okay.
going out, we're doing sort of specific transects, and
Mm-hmm.
we're listening to them with the hydrophones, which helps us locate them. Once we see them, we'll put a drone up and it will help us get a count of how
Yeah.
many there are. But the main thing we're doing is trying to get tail fluke IDs. So if you're
Mm,
able to capture when it flukes at the very end before it goes down for its
right.
final dive,
Mm-hmm.
humpbacks have almost like a human fingerprint. They have a really specific print that's unique just to them. That
Okay.
if you capture it with a long lens camera, you can actually upload it to a few sites. One is called Fluke Book, and one is called Happy Whale, and they
Mm,
use AI to identify the whales. So
yeah.
we've had, I think, our most exciting one that we had recently was one that was last seen in Norway in 2009.
Oh, wow.
So, and you get to name them
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
once you find them. But
Like,
people
hello.
love whales, which is
Yeah.
actually it's so great. Another reason we're trying to get this data is because you can use we would call it megafauna, which includes sharks and
Yeah.
whales, in order to create policy. And usually you
Mm-hmm.
have these kind of heartstring animals like a humpback that
Right.
there's no one who doesn't love a humpback
Yeah.
whale,
Or a
and
turtle or dolphins. Yeah. There's
exactly,
certain
yeah.
ones. Yeah.
So it's really easy to get people to rally behind protection for
Yeah.
humpbacks more than it is for like parrotfish,
Right.
who are also very important to the reefs,
Yeah.
um, and should stop being fished. But that's another side tangent.
Yeah.
But yeah, so mostly we're just trying to get baseline data for whales in the BVI, and humpbacks have been the species that we've really seen a lot of, and they're also so beautiful sounding in the
Yeah.
hydrophones, which are a microphone that we stick in the water, to be able to listen to them,
Mm,
and helps us find them and figure out if they're male or female. So yeah.
right. How many types of whales come through? I know you've picked that one, but are there several?
Yeah.
Because we had those pilot whales that came through. I
Yes.
was trying to remember when those when that was, that like a year ago, longer?
I think it was July 2022.
Okay.
Yeah, July 2022, we had a mass pilot whale stranding.
Mm-hmm.
So it was thought that over 100 whales, I believe, came through, and the majority of those got stranded. They got very cut up. I don't know how familiar your listeners are with BVI and Anegada, but
Right.
they came over. So Anegada is an island that has an outside reef, and I believe that they came from the deep water over the reef, got really cut up, got stuck
Mm-hmm.
inside the reef, and got beached, which
Yeah.
was really sad. We still don't know the exact reason why it happened,
Yeah.
but it is something that's seen across the world in places that are somewhat similar to Anegada.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably something to do with their echolocation that is
Mm.
used to islands like Tortola that are volcanic, and
Yeah.
they can see them from a long way away. When they suddenly get to these low-lying beach islands that are gradually sloping as well,
Right.
I think they have a harder time detecting that. And
Mm.
so, because they're, as in the name, pilot whales, they follow one another. So if one goes over
It
the reef,
goes.
it's thought that all are going to go over the reef. So there's a lot of theories on why it could have happened, and it might be a combination of everything. It
Mm-hmm.
might just be, like I said, that it's harder for them to navigate in
Mm-hmm.
really shallow areas like this. It might also be that there was radar testing from a submarine. It might be that shipping lanes were too loud for them, and it
Right.
steered them off course. I know people often mention military testing, and their radar that can be incredibly loud for
Right.
um, cetaceans that we might not hear. So I don't think we'll ever know
Yeah.
exactly what caused it. It might be
Right.
one or all of those things. Um, But
How
yeah, it
many
was
whales
very
were
sad.
gone? How many was it? Did you say 100 or so that went over?
I believe it was 100 or so that came through. We had to dispose of over 50 bodies.
Mm, mm-hmm.
So we did that. We buried some of them that were more on the beach on land. The ones that were out in the reef, we ended up tying ropes to
And
their
pulling
tail
them out.
flukes and pulling them out and bringing them into open ocean. And we were also able to save a few.
Yeah.
So that was really
It seemed like
an
everybody
incredible
got
experience.
together from Facebook or, social media. It did seem like people were banding together in the community to work together. Was that seemingly right or?
Yeah, yeah. So, especially for the disposal, everyone from
Mm,
Anegada came together and really treated it like it was a community project. I think, in large part, because Anegada is such a strong fishing community
right.
that, they don't, if there's 100 stranded whales, there's going to be a lot of sharks,
Yeah.
and that's the
Eating
waters
other.
that yeah,
Yeah.
well, no, that's the water. It was right around the conch piles, which is the area that they're conch diving
Oh,
in.
yeah.
So, and that they swim in and they use every day. So, I obviously love sharks, but I wouldn't tell anyone to get in the water in a spot where 100 whales had just
Yeah.
passed away. So
Right.
that's going to be a very unsafe feeding frenzy for conch
Mm,
divers.
yeah.
So yeah, everyone, and also just the smell is really horrendous after a
Especially
few
with so
days.
many.
It's a smell unlike I could ever describe. Like the first
Yeah.
day was fine. By day three, it's
Really
pretty
bad.
unbearable. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the community really came together for disposal. I wish we had found out a little sooner. We found out at night and had to go the next
Mm,
morning in
yeah.
order to try to save them because the reefs of Anegada are too hard to navigate at
Mm-hmm.
night. You really have to do it with visual because there are so many small coral heads just under the water.
Right.
But once we figured out that there were a few that we could save, then yeah, we had people come out and help us. A lot of people came over from Virgin Gorda as well
Yeah.
to help. So, but moving forward, we have tried to start more of a stranding network. We're actually waiting to get officially
Mm,
trained, but
yeah.
in the future, in the case of another stranding like this, which I imagine there will probably be another pilot whale stranding.
Mm,
It hasn't been recorded before this one in Anegada, but a lot of the elder community there
right.
has discussed it happening previously. So
Interesting.
I do think that Anegada is a place where this happens to pilot whales.
Interesting. All right, let's talk about something. I mean, not that what you're doing isn't amazing. It's a little more upbeat instead of death of some pretty whales. You and I discussed you've been on Shark Week. Now, did you get on that because of your connection with Discovery early on? Or did you have a relationship with one of the researchers where they were like, hey, come on with me, help me do this? Because that was really cool. I was in my room
Yeah.
watching it. Like I told you, I'm a nerd. I love
Oh,
it.
so
I'm
funny.
a nerd.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute. That's Kendyl. And then I'm like, no, really, I think that's Kendyl. And Levi's like, what? And I said, I'm texting her. I'm like, that's
Yeah.
Kendyl.
So it was actually a mixture of all of those things. It wasn't through Discovery necessarily
Okay.
because Discovery is a network.
Yeah.
And it's usually more production companies who actually make
Yeah.
the shows. But
Okay.
yeah, it was a combo where if I hadn't have been a TV producer and I didn't have an ocean conservation nonprofit that did shark tagging, that
Yeah.
would not have come together. So yeah, it was a personal relationship with one of
That's
the
cool.
producers of the show who was like, I know you're not normally on camera, you're a
Yeah.
behind the camera person, but you know sharks and you also know how to be in front of a camera well enough compared
Right.
to some shark scientists. So,
Yeah. It was fun. It was
and I
exciting.
was
I
like,
was
I'm
like,
not exactly a shark scientist. He's like, yeah, but you've swam
that's
with them
enough.
enough, you've tagged them enough. I'm like, okay, so long as you know that. He's like, yeah, 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 you'll be fine. You're an ocean conservationist. I'm like, whatever you want to word it as. But that was definitely a combo of that was all elements of my life coming together, which
Yeah.
is really exciting when that happens.
Right, right, right. Okay, so I guess we'll save some of the fun for last. When we first got to meet in real life, we'd been working
Yes.
on prior to this, I was working for H2O, and we were working to get Levi with his Ultimate Fan trips. And Levi Lowry, I guess people may or may not know that when they listen to this one. And we were trying to bring awareness for Willie Tees and trying to do the
Yeah.
syncing. Um,
It was when Beyond the Reef had just
it was
formed.
baby, yeah.
Baby, yep.
And we decided on a week in July. I don't even think either one of us knew what we were getting ourselves into. We just picked a date that we were like,
No,
oh, this is when
it
we're
was
going to
I
be
think
there.
when you were going to be there anyway
Yes,
with your
yes,
guests. So it was kind
right.
of that was the day that you could do it.
Yeah. And unknown to us, it was Puerto Rican Christmas. Although I'm not even sure why they call it that in
Yeah,
December.
so they it's Christmas in July. It's a
Right.
yearly um big event where Puerto Ricans come by boat to the BVI. And
Yeah.
it's honestly really great for tourism in the
Yeah.
BVI because July is a really low month. It's
Yeah.
technically in hurricane season. There's not often hurricanes in July, but
Right.
there's not a ton of tourism. So
Because it's hot. It's
yeah, it's
like
hot. Yes,
sweltering.
it
You're
is. It
dying.
is. Yeah, yeah. So Christmas in July, we I don't think realized was happening this date, but bless Levi, he decides he's going to
Yeah.
put on a concert on the new Willie T, which is the boat that we're going to sink.
Yeah.
We get all the approvals, we try inviting people, and he, as most people probably know, is a country musician.
And a
So we have
singer-songwriter. It's not very
singer
I mean, he's lively,
songwriter,
but it's
yeah,
very storytelling.
and it's very family friendly. And so we invite a lot of people, including families, to come for his performance
Yeah.
on the Willie T. Little do we know, this is also the day that thousands of people participating in Christmas in July have also decided to come to the Willie T topless and in
Yeah.
small thongs.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. It
No,
was just a
nothing with
different
any of
vibe.
that.
So we get there, and Levi, again, bless him, is really trying to put his all into performing these beautiful but slightly quieter songs. And we just have a lot of Puerto Ricans in thongs in the
Yeah.
background, like not quite booing him, but just being
No.
like, where is
What is
like
this?
Peso Pluma? Like,
Yeah.
which wasn't a thing at the time, but just like, we want Bad Bunny. Like,
Right.
play us music. Like, we are here, we are drunk, we are in thongs.
And they
We do
had those
not want a singer
paddles and they were
songwriter.
spanking each other.
Oh yeah,
And to
it
make it
was.
worse, my children were little and there, and they're like, "Mom, what's happening? Can I look? Am I allowed to look? Can I look, Mom?" Like, I'm
Yeah,
like,
you're like,
it's
I can't
just,
stop you.
I don't know what to do.
There's
I'm like,
no way to stop you.
we
No,
stayed for a
the
little while. I'm
what
like, I'm taking them back to the boat.
really wild things happen on the Willie T. I don't know like even how much I can go into this, but
I know.
I
It's
have
an
seen
experience all its
some
own.
yeah, every friend I've taken there, they've been like, did someone get a free shot because they stuck a phallic object in their mouth? I'm like,
Yep.
yes, they
Yeah.
did. Yes, they did. So it was, it was really so great of you to organize and Levi to perform, and we'll have to redo it. Not
Yeah.
during Christmas in
No.
July, but
No,
it
no,
did
no.
make for a really good
Yeah.
story of just how opposing these forces were between
Right.
the country music fans and the Puerto Rican army.
Right,
Or
right.
sorry,
We
Puerto
have
Rican Navy is what we call them sometimes when they
Oh,
come over.
well, and like he's had more successful shows. Like we did one at Myatt's. He did one in St. John one time, and those went over well. It was just not a well mixed. Um, he says Willie T's is still one of his favorites.
Good. And I like it's just yeah, people were so drunk by the time they
Oh
showed up
yeah,
there. They just really wanted to shake their butts to something. And
right.
it turns out that like Levi Lowry's music isn't the best for
No,
for
Colder
butt
Weather
shaking,
by the Zac
but
Brown Band and
yeah,
Levi Lowry just isn't their jam.
no. But
I can't
I'm
blame
still
him,
very
right?
grateful of the attempt.
Yeah, for sure. Our guests even jumped in with the Christmas action. I was like,
Yeah, why
what's
not?
happening? You guys.
You've gone to the other side.
Yeah. Willie T's has created their vortex of crazy and you've been sucked in.
Yep, that's how it goes.
It's still that crazy at night every day.
Yeah. Yep,
It's
it
never
is. Yeah.
not, unless it's maybe early lunchtime. There's pockets
If
of
you go
times.
during a weekday, you're generally going to find like tourist families. If you go on a
Yeah.
Sunday, you're going to find the local community there
Yeah.
to party.
Yeah. It was a good time.
It's the most fun time to go.
Okay, so we'll get back to Beyond the Reef. How can people get involved or support, or what if they're like, oh my gosh, this is something amazing? What would you encourage them to do, or how can they get involved?
So, we're a BVI registered nonprofit, but we've also become in the last year or so a US 501(c)(3). So there's, for Americans at least, it's now a tax deduction, which
Yeah,
is great because that seems to be mostly who visits the BVI.
right.
Um, I'm always trying to think of new ways to fundraise, but I'm like, in theory, it is the people who mostly go to the BVI
Right.
are US based, coming on a boat like, the ones that you are helping to charter.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we do community cleanups every so often. I wish we had more ways to physically get involved. It's just that so many of our things
Are
require,
dangerous.
yeah,
Yeah.
if people are treating stony coral, for example, they need to be approved to do so. If people are tagging sharks, it's a harder
Yeah.
one. We did have a lot of community involvement in the whales, but it also became difficult to train people every time. So
Right.
we've stuck to having community members help us with cleanups mostly. So if there's
Yeah.
ever a big group that's coming down and is like, hey, we'd love to dedicate a day to helping you guys with something, there's always something that we can come up with to have
Yeah.
them help with, even if it's like, I recently was like, oh, maybe we can build some cool recycled wood trash cans for Anegada. For anyone who's walking along the beach, they can pick it up and put
Yeah.
it in there. If anyone's coming with a large group and wants to get involved, then
Yeah.
definitely message. We do take stony coral volunteers, but usually we try to have people that are going to have some longevity if we're
Right.
training them. So if they're down for a season more so, which might be more like boat crew rather than vacationers. But any way that we can spread the word is
Yeah.
great. There's a few other things we try to spread the word on too, which we make these sort of sustainable seafood guides for the BVI, because
Yeah.
a lot of people coming down don't know what they should be ordering.
Mm.
Everyone wants to go to Anegada and just eat lobster for 5 nights and conch for 5 nights. And we're like, maybe
Right.
you should have it for 1 or 2 meals and not
Yeah.
all of them. Like, here's some good fish options that you can have other than lobster and conch,
Right.
because it really does need time to get its numbers back up. So yeah, looking into the sustainable seafood guides, helping spread the word on where to not anchor. So
Right.
trying to make sure everyone knows, please don't anchor on top of a reef. It takes a really long time for that to grow. So
Yeah.
find mooring balls, or if you are going to anchor, make sure you're on sand or
Right.
somewhere that isn't going to be harmful.
Do you guys have that in like PDF form packets that you give people, or is it
Yeah,
printables
we
or?
do we do have printables, and we can share that with anyone as well. We share it with a lot of the charter companies and hope that they
Yeah.
include it. I think a lot of them do include it on their own.
Yeah.
But it's something we'd like to work even more into. I don't know what the citations even are for if you do anchor on reef right now, but
Mm.
it's something we would like to see more punishments in place
Right.
for,
It depends on
because
the
it is
mood of the
like,
BVI.
it does, yeah. Unfortunately, it does, but it is a thing where even if, if your boat go needs to be salvaged, for example, um, there's so much money in the salvage of it and how much, but there's nothing going back to repairing the reefs that it's damaged. So you're
Right.
not really held accountable for anything environmentally.
Mm-mm.
Um,
Like over
so
there in
yeah, so just
Village Key,
creating,
that big hot
yeah,
mess. Aren't those mangroves that it's in?
yep, yeah.
Yeah. It's
Village
like,
Key
ugh.
is, our divers are in there every day. Bless them.
Are they?
Yeah, yep.
That's awesome that
That's
they're
where
in
all of
there
our
doing
boats
that.
are. So
Yeah,
yeah,
right. I spent a good bit of time there early last year and would see it every day. I saw several of the divers, had to go into the shop a couple of times, the dive shop, and
yeah.
they're always working, always doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool to see. I wish that I were closer. I would love to get involved because we scuba dive. I would have to learn some things, obviously,
Yeah.
but yeah, I would love stuff
But
like that.
usually, you know what? We're not such a big organization that people can't just, people email me and are like, "Hey, I
Mm.
am going to be there," like, or I'm not even there. How can I get involved? And usually I'll just
Yeah,
talk to them and end up coming up with
Yeah.
because I think, if somebody wants to help, I never want to say no. I mean, it's beautiful. I
Yeah.
never want to say
Yeah.
no. So,
Right.
having us on a podcast, like that's
Yeah.
helpful. There's so many
Right.
ways that it can be helpful.
Yeah.
Or even just inspiring people to do the same in their communities. All of it helps.
Right. I love everything you're doing. And it was like, I knew about you guys obviously before, but then when I was reading more and I'm like, they do so much more. There's so many avenues and there's so many ways people could get involved or support or just
Yeah,
all of it.
yeah. I do wish there were more physical ways people could get involved. But apparently you can't just throw people out to tag
Yeah.
sharks. So
Yeah, that's
for
probably
both
not a good idea.
their safety and the shark safety,
We can use the example of when Jackass did that little trick for Shark Week and he like fell in
yes.
the center and he like I don't know, did he get nicked or something or it was
You know
not
what's funny?
good.
I never saw that, but on my Shark Week episode when we were
Yeah.
filming, they were telling me about that. And yeah, it's
I was like,
anytime that there's a
"What?"
large splash,
Yeah.
sharks are going to go that way.
They're like,
So
"Hello."
there's a lot of ways to avoid getting attacked by a shark, and there's a lot of ways to get attacked by a
Yeah.
shark. And so, that's the best possible way is
Right.
to make a huge splash like that suddenly on the surface of the water.
Right.
If he had just calmly gotten into the water with a mask on in that same spot,
Yeah.
he would not have gotten
It wouldn't have gotten the
attacked in any way.
dramatic effect though for Shark Week ratings.
No, and those jackass guys, like
They're
they know what
that's
they're
it.
doing. They're willing
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah.
So
Anyway.
bless them in a way
Yeah.
for their contributions to society and all teenage children looking to do the same.
Yeah. No, what not to do. Um, well, this is awesome. I really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else you want to add or say or
I mean, I feel like we covered a lot
a
of
lot?
the things happening with Beyond the Reef.
Yeah.
Again, I'm super grateful for being on and getting to
Yeah.
spread the word. I think I'm technically the one in charge of fundraising and
Yeah.
publicity, and I'm really bad at both. So this is very helpful to be able to spread. Anyone who ever wants to hear more about Beyond the Reef in an article or anything, we'll
Yeah.
talk all day about it. Our
Yeah.
team is incredibly passionate. We all do it because
Right.
it's something that we really love doing and a
Right.
really good excuse to spend your days in the water.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah.
funny now. Anytime I go for a recreational dive, I'm like, what's my mission? And
This
then I'm
is
like, okay, I'm here
boring.
meditating. This is
Yeah.
fun. But it is once you get used to doing, whale research or shark tagging
Right.
or even just applying paste to coral, then
Mm.
it does become a thing where you're like, okay, well, what's my task now?
Yeah.
That might be a little bit of my ADHD in there that needs to be doing something, but
Always something different. But it sounds
yeah,
really cool. And maybe as people are looking for things to do as they get older, next steps in life, it's always something they could. Like Levi and I, when our boys graduate, we have one graduated and another one in high school. Like we want to get our captain's license and get a boat. And I'm
nice.
like,
Yeah,
now I'm thinking maybe we'll just go and work on some coral and do some things
yeah,
because I love being in the
yeah,
water. I always talk about how it's crazy and the water up top's moving, but as you go under, it's ridiculously calm
yep.
and just this place of zen. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it.
And I
Levi
think,
doesn't dive.
yeah, well, you should get him certified. It
I,
is a
I've been working on it.
it's not too intimidating. Get him snorkeling
No.
first, take him somewhere.
Yeah.
I always tell people if you have the ability to get certified somewhere clear and warm,
Yeah.
it's going to be more successful. It's already so intimidating diving for
Mm-hmm.
the first time if that's not
Yeah.
something. I think it's easier with kids. The older you get, the more you sort
You're
of
in your
build up
head.
this and yeah.
Yeah.
And I think diving around the world is beautiful, obviously. I don't want to say don't get certified where you live, but I do think it makes it a little more
Yeah.
pleasant to do it somewhere that's
Right.
good visibility and warm, just so you're taking those elements out of something that's already somewhat
Yeah.
new and challenging.
I found the hardest part of getting my checkout dive certification was having to take my mask off
Yep,
underwater.
yep.
Like
That
my
part
brain, and
sucks.
then I just had to turn my head so that the bubbles would go up and not like up in my face, because I was freaking myself out.
Yeah.
I'm like, Baza was laughing at me. He's like,
Well, the good thing
Stephanie.
is you do it once and then you never do it again.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wear my mask a lot, but it's never a full
Mm-mm.
takeoff.
It's
I'll just
just
let some in and then
yeah, and let it out.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been
Yeah.
teaching my kids that in the pool because even you use that snorkeling,
That's the
clearing your
best place
mask.
to learn. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can learn, that's how I learned to dive. Actually, my mom just threw me in the pool with the tank when I was a kid, and I was like,
Oh,
okay,
very
and got
cool.
comfortable with it, so that
Yeah.
once I went diving, it was easier. But
Yeah.
I think anyone who has the capability to, and that's also something we're trying to do in the BVI is make it so that any kid knows that diving is something that they can do,
Yeah.
especially if they're on an island. But no matter where in the world you live, there will be a way to get
Make it
certified,
happen.
even if
Yeah.
it's in a local lake.
Yeah.
But it is a really beautiful way to get to explore the ocean. And like you said, once you're doing projects that help with it, you feel so great.
Yeah.
Anyone who has a relationship with the ocean has probably come to be in awe of it, whether it's
Yeah.
terror or love or
Yeah.
a mix. Like for me, it's always a mix. I would say, nobody thinks I'm
Yes.
afraid of the ocean, and I'm like, oh no, I still am.
Inside, I'm like freaking out. I won't be the first one to jump
Yeah,
in ever. Like it's just not
yeah.
happening. I still am like, yeah, go right ahead. I'll be in right after you.
I think
It's something
anything
with
that you
my
have
brain.
respect for, you need to still have a fear of. So it is like, I still have a fear, I like to surf as well, and I still have a fear of waves, and I still have a
Yeah.
fear of sometimes if you jump into deep ocean,
Yeah.
like off Anegada where it's a 2,000-foot drop and it's just this blue, there's
Yeah.
something initially intimidating, and then you're like, oh, it's actually so much more beautiful
Hmm.
than a reef in some ways because I'm
Really?
just like alone in this
Yeah.
blueness all around me, which is
That's
really cool. Nothing to look at, you just kind
yeah.
of zen. You do that
Right.
in free diving a lot when in the courses where they teach you, you'll just be sort of in
Yeah.
deep water oftentimes, and
Hmm.
there's nothing else to think about other than just your breath.
That's crazy. So I'm totally fine going in knowing there's a bottom. But, and I say that being like, I can go 80, 90 feet down. I'm golden. But I think if
Yeah.
you put me out and I know it's open and eventually there's a bottom, there's just I don't know. I can't do
No,
that.
a lot of people are that way.
I don't
That's something that a lot of people share. Yeah.
know why.
Yeah.
Something, it's the Meg's fault, that movie. No, I'm just kidding.
Right? It's like it's movies' fault for everything. It's
Right, right.
Jaws' fault at half the way for sharks, which um again is something that I think everyone needs to have a healthy level of respect for the
Yeah,
fact that they are dangerous, but at the same time, shark attacks are so, 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 so rare
yeah,
that they've been allowed to be demonized because
right.
there's a few attacks a year. But yeah, sharks are, this could be a whole nother ramble, but
Yeah,
sharks are still, it's still a delicacy to eat shark fin soup, and they will literally
right.
just take the fins off and throw the
And
bodies
destroy.
back in the ocean.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
and BVI even is a shark sanctuary. You're not allowed to kill sharks in the
right.
BVI, and yet I still walk into a supermarket and see sharks
Mm,
for sale all the time.
yeah.
And
You can't even fish for them, right? In certain areas, I guess, but
yeah, it's illegal in all of the BVI, but
mm,
that's what I'm saying. They still are in the markets.
yeah.
Spain, I think, is the main exporter of sharks, which you wouldn't guess. But yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, any sort of megafauna like a shark really helps to keep the entire reefs in check. And so, again, this is another side tangent, but I could do a whole podcast on why we need to protect sharks.
Yeah,
But incredibly important, and I think the way that we have demonized them because they're a scary creature has made it so that people think it's okay to kill them.
yeah.
But I do think that is a really important one that we need to solve for in the next 10 years, especially because it will have a huge impact on the greater ocean health.
Hmm. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah,
This was probably one of our longer chats. Hopefully that's I found it
hopefully that's
interesting.
fine. Yeah. I think if you're interested in ocean stuff, then it'll be
Yeah.
interesting. And if you're not, you'll instantly turn it off
Move on.
or just put a note
Just
so you can fast
fast forward.
forward to
Yeah.
Puerto Rican thongs. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
Nice to see you. Talk
You
soon.
too.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Songs in the Sails podcast. We thrive because of listeners and viewers like you. Please like, subscribe, share, and leave us a review. If you have comments and questions, please send us an email, yachtcharters@songsinthesails.com. Now, come sail away.